General Hospital spoilers for Wednesday, September 10th, reveal Curtis Ashford's reaction to Drew Kane's shooting claim, while Harrison Chase has a huge question for Willow Tate. First, on Wednesday's episode of General Hospital, Carly Spencer will give Lulu Spencer some unexpected advice. Carly appears to be pressuring Lulu to enable Charlotte Cassadine to visit Valentine Cassadine at Steinmauer, but Lulu has no idea why. Carly may explain that she trusts Jack Brennan's judgment, and that he would not be pressing for this unless it was important. Elsewhere, Nina Reeves will get an attractive proposal, which may be related to Brennan and the Charlotte drama. Charlotte's former stepmother may be drawn into the matter because Nina may have some updates for Lulu later. At GH, Isaiah Gannon will make it plain that he wants to establish a genuine romance with Portia Robinson, but he will also respect her decision to keep what transpired between them private. Portia appears to be opting for secrecy for the time being, possibly due to the chaos surrounding Drew's shooting. Portia may believe it is best to maintain the status quo and make things appear normal at home for the time being. Kai Taylor will have a strategy session with Trina Robinson. Kai will suggest a strategy for them to defend themselves if suspicion falls on them, but Trina will stay on edge. Trina will also open up to Emma Scorpio Drake during Wednesday's episode. Although Trina may not disclose anything about what happened at Drew's place, she may claim she's seen a different side of Kai, and is now questioning if he deserves another opportunity. Elizabeth Baldwin will have a heated conversation with Lucas Jones. Liz will admit that if the police question her, she will have no option. Elizabeth appears to know she may have to refute elements of Willow's statement, which could make her appear guilty during the investigation. Chase will ask Willow whether she still plans to reunite with Drew. Willow's quick abandonment of Drew might appear suspicious, so she could reassure Chase that she's fully committed to their reconciliation. Drew will continue to make charges against Curtis in his room. Drew just revealed that he has every reason to believe Curtis shot him, but he urged Curtis not to worry since he blames Michael Corinthos. Drew will double down on Curtis as his top suspect in Wednesday's episode, reaffirming his opinion that Curtis is the one who shot him. Curtis may refute this, arguing that the entire town has a reason to want Drew gone for forever. Michael was in the middle of asking Jacinda to be his alibi, when Dante Falconeri unexpectedly emerged to question him. Will Jacinda speak up in support of Michael and confirm his narrative, knowing he has plenty of money to pay her? Regardless, Dante and Anna Devane will question Michael about that night soon enough. According to General Hospital spoilers, Michael will do everything he can to divert attention away from himself, so stay tuned for more on his responses and the overall whodunit. CDL is the place to go for amazing General Hospital spoilers, news and updates, so make us your #1 source. The General Hospital recap for Tuesday, September 9th shows that the resort exploded, Drew Kane called the cops, and Michael Corinthos and Jacinda obtained an alibi job. Drew awoke at GH inquiring whether Willow Tate was present, and Elizabeth Baldwin informed him that she was with Scout Quartermain. Drew discovered that Portia Robinson was his doctor and requested a change, but Portia insisted on keeping him under her care until another one could be arranged. Dante Falconeri eventually arrived and questioned Drew about what he remembered. Drew pondered on the excruciating pain of being shot in the back and discussed preparing a drink and taking Willow's engagement ring from the safe. Dante questioned what else was in the safe, so Drew returned to his Portia blackmail material, and maintained that the cops did not have clearance to dig through his confidential information. Dante also asked Drew if anyone would have a reason to pursue him, and Drew pointed the finger at Michael. At the Port Charles Grill, Michael updated Curtis Ashford on his need to contact Jacinda, who could serve as his alibi. Curtis revealed the name of the modeling agency that was a cover for the escort service, which he recognized from earlier investigation. Jacinda explained in Portia's office that Drew had paid for her stay away from Port Charles, but her terrible money management had forced her to return for more. Since Drew was shot, Jacinda pushed Portia for financial assistance instead. Portia made it plain that Jacinda would not be receiving any more money, and that if she attempted to expose Portia and Nina Reeves for the drugging conspiracy, she would implicate herself. Portia advised Jacinda to pretend Drew freely brought drugs to their evening out if she was questioned, and then sent her on her way. Jacinda received a phone call on her way out of Portia's office, saying she'd take the job along with anything else because she was desperate. Michael was waiting for Jacinda when she arrived to the Port Charles Grill, where they exchanged formal greetings. Jacinda was intrigued about why Michael had tracked her down, so he dropped some hints, which led her to realize he needed an alibi. Dante arrived and stopped Michael's meeting with Jacinda to ask his brother a few questions concerning Drew's shooting. Alexis Davis was willing to answer questions in Anna Devane's office, accompanied by Diane Miller, her lawyer. Anna Devane had Alexis walk her through everything she did before Drew's shooting. Alexis was queried about the restraining order, and she cited Curtis' visit to discuss Stella Henry's case. Alexis then claimed she spent 2 hours attempting to assist Ava Jerome and Christina Corinthos Davis reconcile for Avery Corinthos' sake. Diane eventually concluded the session, because she believed Alexis had supplied sufficient answers. Anna cautioned that there would be follow-up inquiries, but Diane pretended that Anna had all the information she needed. Charlotte Cassadine complained about Bobby's harsh punishment, but Lulu Spencer believed her daughter had gotten away with everything for far too long. Outside, Jack Brennan welcomed Rocco Falconeri with Outback before entering the restaurant with Lulu and Charlotte. Charlotte gave Brennan an attitude before joining Rocco in front. When they were alone, Brennan told Lulu about Valentine Cassadine's desire to see Charlotte at Steinmuir in exchange for assisting the WSB. Although Brennan told Lulu that Charlotte would be secure, she refused to accept it. Brennan called Vaughn and Jocelyn Jacks to discuss the matter before returning his focus to Lulu. Charlotte's value was enhanced by the fact that she was Valentine's daughter. Brennan hinted that his assistance might be required someday as he resumed his plea for collaboration. Outside, Charlotte spoke to Rocco about Brennan, and how she missed the freedom she had while on the run with Valentine. Britt Westbourne felt Pascal was acting alone in the lab at the Five Poppies resort when he blew her up. Pascal refused to liberate Britt, leaving her in a panic. Once Vaughn and Jocelyn were out of their bindings, Josh struck the guard who was choking Jason Morgan and knocked him out. Jason looked at Jocelyn, but any questioning would have to wait since he wanted to go help Britt. Jason returned for Britt, who questioned if he could remove the ankle monitor without blowing them both up. Britt pressed Jason to go for the sake of his children, but he made it plain that if necessary, he would accompany her. Jason removed the ankle monitor, but time was running out due to Pascal's countdown. Pascal and some guards attempted to block Jason and Britt's path, but Vaughn emerged and intervened with his rifle. Jocelyn, Vaughn, Britt, and Jason all attempted to escape, but the explosion knocked them down. Fortunately, all 4 of them were unscathed except for some minor cosmetic damage from the blast. Britt appreciated Jason's role as a human shield, but she requested him to get off her. Jason and Britt exchanged passionate looks, but it became funny when she said she disliked his tattoos. General Hospital spoilers indicate that Jason and Britt will have a convoluted love story, so stay tuned. CDL will have more intriguing General Hospital spoilers, updates, and news to share, so consider us your go-to GH source. The air in Port Charles was thick with tension, a palpable undercurrent of mistrust and hidden truths that seemed to permeate every conversation and glance exchanged in the town's bustling streets and quiet corners. Curtis Ashford stood in the eye of a tempest he hadn't anticipated, his head reeling from the accusation launched at him like a grenade, threatening to upend the delicate balance of his life. Drew Kane, a guy with a complicated and secretive past, accused Curtis of being involved in a shooting that shook their neighborhood to its core. The weight of the claim weighed heavily on Curtis, not just because it was serious, but also because it cut to the heart of who he was, a man who had always prided himself on his integrity, even when the world around him seemed determined to put it to the test. Curtis strolled the length of his flat, the wooden floor squeaking with his methodical feet. The charge was more than a personal attack. It was a betrayal of trust, a crack in the foundation of connections he'd fought hard to repair after years of battling his own issues. Drew's words resonated sharply in his mind. "You were there, Curtis. You know more than you're letting on." The implication was clear. Drew suspected Curtis had either pulled the trigger or known who had, and the thought that someone he'd once considered an ally could think him capable of such a thing wounded harder than he cared to acknowledge. Curtis wasn't unfamiliar with confrontation. His years as a private investigator had exposed him to the darkest aspects of human nature, but this was different. This was a personal test to his character, one he couldn't ignore. Curtis recounted the circumstances leading up to Drew's accusation as he stepped to the window and looked out at the city lights flickering against the nighttime sky. The incident happened many weeks ago, During an apparently typical gathering at the Quartermain estate, a gunshot rang out, shattering the sense of safety, and while no one was gravely hurt, the incident put everyone on edge. Suspicion has swirled ever since, with fingers pointing in all directions as the authorities tried to piece together what had transpired. Curtis had been present, but just as a guest, not as the perpetrator. He'd witnessed the turmoil, heard the screaming, and done what he always did: tried to take control and protect those around him. Drew's statements now suggested that his actions had been misconstrued, or worse, that someone was intentionally distorting the story to make him the villain. The thought gnawed at him. Why did Drew believe he was involved? Curtis and Drew had never been close, but they had always had mutual respect, formed via common ties and the twisted web of Port Charles relationships. Drew's claim was unexpected, but Curtis knew better than to believe in coincidences. Someone or something had sown the seed of doubt in Drew's mind, and Curtis was determined to discover who. His first inclination was to face Drew immediately, demanding explanations and clearing his name, but he was aware that this strategy could backfire. Emotions were high, and a passionate argument might only exacerbate the schism between them. Instead, he chose to take a step back and treat the situation like he would in any other case. Methodically, with a clear head and a concentration on the facts. Curtis sat at his desk, reaching for a notepad and pen, a habit he had developed while working as a private investigator. He started writing down what he knew. The shooting had place at the Quartermain estate, at a busy event with scores of witnesses. The bullet came from a high-powered rifle shot from a distance, implying a sniper rather than a member of the crowd. The police discovered minimal evidence at the scene. No shell casings, no clear line of sight, and no discernible reason. Curtis had been near the terrace when the shot went off, assisting people to safety, but he had not seen the shooter or anything odd in the seconds preceding the commotion. He wrote Drew's name, circled it, and added a question mark. What did Drew know or believe he knew that prompted this accusation? More significantly, who benefited from putting a wedge between them? Curtis was mulling over the options when his phone buzzed on the desk. The name on the screen caused his heart to skip a beat. Portia. His wife was his anchor, the only person who could keep him grounded when everything else looked out of control. He responded, and her voice was warm but worried. Curtis, are you all right? I just heard what Drew said. How could he believe you had anything to do with it? Curtis breathed, the strain in his shoulders lessening slightly with the sound of her words. Portia's steadfast support saved his life, but it also served as a reminder of the stakes. This charge harmed not only him, but also their family, reputation, and everything they had accomplished together. I'm fine, he responded, but the words felt empty. I'm just trying to find out where this comes from. Drew isn't the sort to make charges without a cause, but I'm not sure what that reason is yet. Portia's quiet on the other end indicated that she was considering, weighing her words carefully. You need to talk to him, Curtis, she finally said. Not to fight, but to understand. If someone is telling him lies, you must find out who and why. Curtis nodded, despite the fact that she could not see him. Portia was correct, as she frequently is. This wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about finding the truth, no matter how messy or difficult it was. Their talk turned to other topics, but Curtis' thoughts kept returning to Drew. He couldn't ignore the idea that this claim was part of something broader, something that extended beyond a single incident of violence. Port Charles was a community founded on secrets, and Curtis had discovered enough of them throughout his career to know that nothing is ever as simple as it seemed. He considered the other participants in this drama. Sonny Corinthos, whose shady ties could never be ruled out, Carly Spencer, whose devotion to Drew may be clouding her judgment, and even Nina Reeves, whose ability to stir the fire was unparalleled. Any of them could be connected, either directly or indirectly, and Curtis knew he had to move cautiously to avoid stepping on the wrong foot. Meanwhile, across town, another drama was playing out, with its own set of emotions and consequences. Chase, the stable presence amid a chaotic town, was struggling with a question that had been rising inside him for weeks. His relationship with Willow Corinthos had provided him with strength, a rare bright spot in a life filled with loss and disappointment. But now, as he stood on the verge of making a life-changing decision, Chase was filled with doubts, not about his emotions for Willow, but about whether the timing was right, and whether she was prepared for what he was about to ask. Chase had always been a planner, someone who carefully considered the pros and drawbacks before making decisions. But love, he discovered, didn't always go as planned. His feelings for Willow had progressively increased, strengthening with each shared moment, every quiet chat, and every time she looked at him with that warm and vulnerable look that made his heart hurt. He wanted to ask her to marry him, to embark on a future together, but the weight of her past, her difficult relationship with Michael Corinthos and the lingering shadow of their marriage, made him hesitant. Willow had worked hard to forge her own path and rebuild herself after heartbreak, and Chase didn't want to push her into anything she wasn't prepared for. He'd carefully chosen the setting, a calm evening in the park, under the same oak tree where they'd had their first serious chat, when their connection was still a spark, not a blaze. Chase held the ring in his pocket, a simple but gorgeous band that he'd spent hours worrying over, hoping it was ideal for her. Chase felt the words developing as they walked together, the cool evening air stroking across their skin. It was the question he'd rehearsed 100 times. But as he looked at Willow, her eyes remote as she talked about her day, he hesitated. Was this the appropriate moment? Was he being selfish by asking her to make such a significant commitment while her life was still so entangled with the past? Willow, for her part, seems unconcerned by Chase's emotional turmoil. She discussed her work at the hospital, the patients who had touched her heart, and the minor successes that kept her going in a career that could be both tiring and fulfilling. Chase listened as he usually did, allowing her words to wash over him, grounding him even while his own thoughts raced. He admired her drive, resilience, and ability to see the good in even the worst of times. But he was also aware that her resilience came at a cost, that she bore difficulties she rarely discussed, and he didn't want to add to them. Chase paused as they approached the oak tree and took her hand in his. Willow's brow furrowed slightly as she noticed the sudden change in his mood. "What's wrong?" she inquired, her voice quiet yet full of anxiety. Chase took a long breath, his heart beating against his chest. This was it, the moment he'd been preparing for, but the words felt heavier and more real. "Willow," he said, his voice firm despite his anxiety, "there's something I need to ask you." Her eyes widened, and for a minute time seemed to pause, the world contracting to just the two of them, standing under the sprawling branches of the tree. Curtis was still dealing with his own predicament when he returned to his flat, oblivious of the parallel drama playing out across town. He decided to contact Drew and arrange a face-to-face meeting where they could chat without accusations or defensiveness, just two men attempting to find out the truth. But as he typed the message, his fingers hovered above the submit button. What if Drew was not acting alone? What if this was part of a bigger plan, one Curtis couldn't see yet? The notion sent shivers down his spine, not because he was afraid of the truth, but because he knew how easily it could be perverted in a city like Port Charles. Curtis' thoughts turned to previous cases, to when he discovered secrets that had transformed people's lives, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. He'd always believed in doing the right thing, even if it meant standing alone and facing difficulties. But this time the stakes were larger. This was more than simply a case. It was about his reputation, his family, and his role in a community that was quick to pass judgment and difficult to forgive. He thought about Portia, their daughter, and the life they were creating together, and he realized he couldn't leave Drew's charge unanswered. Curtis felt a mixture of resolution and uncertainty as he sent the message to Drew. He had no idea what the conversation would bring, but he was prepared to confront it and fight for the truth, whatever it may be. Across town, Chase was still holding Willow's hand, the words of his question lingering in the air, waiting for her answer. Two men, two questions, two moments that could change everything. Port Charles was a community where nothing remained simple for long, and the answers when they arrived had far-reaching consequences. The night went on, the city alive with its own rhythm and secrets. Curtis sat back in his chair, staring at the phone and waited for Drew's response. Chase waited beneath the oak tree, his heart in his throat, waiting for Willow to speak. And in the spaces between, the threads of their lives intertwined, tangled and complex, creating a tapestry of decisions and consequences that would alter the future in ways neither of them could have predicted. The night began with peaceful expectation, but by the time the sirens sounded, chaos had taken over. Drew had been watching the resort for weeks, worried that Michael was hiding something large enough to demolish everything Drew had constructed. It was no longer simply about secrets, it was personal. Drew had been feeling the strain between them for months, ever since he realized that Michael had been withholding information regarding Willow's treatments, Jason's homecoming, and Sunny's broken empire. Every deception had eroded what little trust there was, and everything came tumbling down tonight. Drew did not design the explosion, but he knew who would bear the brunt of the consequences. As the ground trembled under the force of the bomb and plumes of smoke rose into the humid Port Charles air, Drew's thoughts raced with one distinct thought: Michael Corinthos would pay. Sirens sounded in the distance as firefighters hurried toward the blazing resort. Flames licked the night sky, throwing shadows on the sand as terrified guests fled for shelter.